Imagine you just sent out on a routine repair mission. Your name is Isaac Clarke, a ship systems engineer, not a soldier, not a hero, just a guy who fixes things. Your job is simple. Respond to a distress signal from the USG Ishimura, a massive mining vessel. It should be straightforward. Dock, assess the problem, get the ship operational, and go home. But the moment you step aboard, you realize that this isn't just any routine at all. The ship is dark, quiet, and littered with blood and strange organic loads. The crew is nowhere to be found, or rather, what's left of them has been transformed into something else entirely. These creatures, called necromorphs, are unlike anything you've ever encountered. They're not zombies you can simply shoot in the head. They're grotesque, reanimated corpses that require a different approach. You have to dismember them, cut off their limbs to stop their relentless advance. You're not equipped for this. You're an engineer, trapped on a nightmare ship in the depths of space, armed with improvised tools, trying to survive long enough to understand what happened here, and more importantly, how to escape. This is Dead Space, and what I want to talk about today isn't the story about what Isaac discovers. I want to explore how this game makes you feel every moment of that terror, isolation, and desperation through masterful atmospheric game design and immersive gameplay mechanics that modern horror games still struggle to match. Dead Space tells its story in many ways, but none more effectively than through its environmental design. The level layouts themselves become narrative tools. Tight corridors and open spaces each tell a story of whether someone or something was here before you. You'll find yourself in cramped maintenance shafts with flickering lights, never knowing if a necromorph are just lurking around the corner. Even open spaces carry uncertain vibes. Something could be watching from the ceiling or ready to crash through a very door that you are about to enter. Walking through these spaces tell a story, though more than just architecture, text logs, and audio recordings. And desperate messages scrawled on walls, like the haunting instruction to just cut off their limbs, serve as a guidance from beyond the grave, helping you in this nightmare quest. The visual design of Dead Space is pure nightmare fuel. Blood trails and scratch marks on the wall don't need exposition. They just tell you everything about what happened here, what happened before you arrived. Seeing corpses scattered throughout certain areas, some still suffering and crying for help in their final moments, creates an atmosphere of dread and desperation. Walking through areas like the medical or engineering decks and seeing the personal belongings of what were just normal people brings a profound sense of sadness and the haunting question, will we make it home? Dead Space lighting design is equally masterful. Casually walking through corridors as lights flicker overhead, experiencing sudden light failures while hearing distant necromorph screeches. All of this adds layers to the horror experience, and those moments after completing an objective, when emergency lights activate and you're suddenly in lockdown with 5 necromorphs bearing down on you. These create genuine tension and urgency, forcing players into survival mode. Think about those moments when you step into a brightly lit room, maybe the medical bay or the maintenance area, and for just a second you feel relief. The harsh white light reveals everything, no shadows to hide threats. But then you notice the exit on the far side, in darkness, and that safety immediately evaporates. Dead Space weaponizes this contrast constantly. It gives you islands of harsh, sterile lighting that feels momentarily secure, but always forces you to venture back into the unknown darkness beyond. This game understands that safety in horror is just the setup for the next scene. Let's examine how color shapes Dead Space's atmosphere and tells the story of the Ishimura's fall. In areas that remain clean, like tram stations and some other medical facilities, you see cold blues and whites being displayed. But the second Necromorph's corruption takes hold, the palette shifts dramatically. Blood red smears across walls, sickly yellows and oranges from emergency lighting when you have to be trapped and fight those things, and some disturbing fleshly growths that display unnatural colors. This visual storytelling shows exactly where humanity has lost its grip on the ship, just through the color temperature of a room. The maintenance shafts and service corridors force you into tight claustrophobic spaces where you can barely see past Isaac's shoulders. Your field of vision is restricted. You can't backpedal quickly, and every corner becomes a potential death trap. The ship's industrial design works against you. These aren't always meant for combat. They're functional spaces that become psychological torture chambers. Those endless medical bay corridors or the main ship where you can see far ahead, but everything is completely empty. Your footsteps echo, nothing's moving in the distance, but the game has conditioned you to expect something. You're walking through what would be safety, but the anticipation is killing you. The emptiness becomes more terrifying than the actual encounters with the necromorphs. When you enter cargo bays or engineering sections without gravity, suddenly up and down lose all meaning. You become disorientated, not knowing what's around you. Even your objective seems lost. Threats can come from any direction. The ceiling becomes another floor. Your spatial awareness gets completely scrambled, and what was once a simple room becomes a three-dimensional maze of terror. Something as simple as a doorway serves a crucial purpose. Every single doorway in Dead Space is a question mark. The camera positioning ensures you can never quite see what's around the corner or through the next door. Medical bay entrances, engineering room thresholds, they keyframe the unknown perfectly, forcing you to commit to moving forward without knowing what's waiting for you ahead. These are just a few examples of how the ship's architecture becomes a character in the horror experience. Dead Space isn't just about what you see. Sometimes fear isn't visual alone. What you hear is just as nightmare inducing as what you see. And this is my favorite part about Dead Space. The Ishimura never let you forget you're on a dying ship in the vacuum of space. There's this constant low, mechanical hum, life support system struggling to keep running, distant machinery grinding away. You hear the ship creaking and settling like an old haunted house, except you're millions of miles in deep space. Even when nothing is happening, the audio tells you in this place is barely holding together.
Interior tethers at full power.
Dead Space's audio constantly manipulates you. You hear a vent rattle as you walk past it, making you spin around expecting an attack, but nothing. Distant screams echo through corridors you haven't visited yet. Often you hear faint whispers, never knowing if you're hallucinating or not. The game layers in audio cues that spike your adrenaline, footsteps that might not be yours, or just might be, metal groaning that could be the ship settling or something crawling through the walls. You just never know, and that's the beauty of the game's sound design. But here's where Dead Space gets really clever. Sometimes it goes completely quiet. You'll enter a room and suddenly all the ambient noise just stops. No humming, no distant sounds, nothing. Your brain knows something's wrong because the ship's voice has gone silent. These moments of dead air are more terrifying than any scream because they signal that something is about to break that silence violently, and you just have to be ready to face it. The sound design makes you feel truly alone in space. In zero-G sections, you can hear Isaac's breathing inside the helmet, making you hyper aware of how thin that barrier is between you and that void. Every sound feels muffled and distant. It's like, well, audio claustrophobia. Even the sound makes you, the player, feel like you can't breathe. Dead Space does something brilliant. It refuses to break immersion with traditional HUD elements. Isaac's health isn't displayed in a corner of your screen. It's literally on the spine through his suit's medical display. When you access your inventory, it's not a pause menu. It's a holographic interface that Isaac projects in real time while the world continues around you. You're vulnerable while checking your gear because Isaac is vulnerable. The UI makes you feel like you're actually wearing that engineering suit, like you're actually on that ship. Most games teach you to aim for the head. That's how any gamer who's played for years would think. But Dead Space deliberately breaks that instinct. Headshots barely slow these creatures down. You have to think like an engineer. Cut off their limbs that make them mobile and dangerous. This isn't just a unique mechanic, it's psychological horror. You're not killing monsters. You're systematically dismantling reanimated human remains. The combat systems force you to engage with grotesque reality of what these characters actually are. Dead Space came from an era when horror games trusted atmosphere over jump scares. Compare this to modern horror titles that rely on sudden loud noises and scripted moments. And while I'm not saying every current game does this, it's more common than not. Dead Space builds dread through environmental design and audio. You're scared of rooms that are completely empty because the game has conditioned you to expect danger. Modern games tell you when to be scared. Dead Space makes you scared to exist in its world. Dead Space had a clear, unified vision. Every element serves the horror experience. The UI design, the combat mechanics, even the loading screen maintains immersion. Compare this to modern AAA games where different teams handle different systems, often resulting in conflicting design philosophies that make games feel messy. You can even feel when a game was made by a focus team versus when it's designed by a committee trying to please every demographic they can. This is why Dead Space works so well. Dead Space understood that horror requires commitment from both developer and player. It doesn't compromise its vision to appeal to everyone. It creates one perfect experience for people who want genuine horror. Modern games often dilute their impact trying to be accessible to all audiences, taking an almost safe and comfortable approach. But you cannot please every gamer, and horror is supposed to be uncomfortable, challenging, isolating. Dead Space had the courage to be exactly what it needed to be, and it fulfills that purpose perfectly. Since the game's original title release was in 2008, Dead Space has gathered a huge following and is remembered as a masterpiece of a horror game. The success of the 2023 remake shows that modern audiences still crave this type of horror experience. The game became the second highest selling game of that year. Dead Space endures because it understood something fundamental. True horror comes from craftsmanship and not gimmicks. While modern game finds trends to chase, Dead Space trusted its vision completely. That's why 15 years later, it can still make a grown adult afraid to turn corners in a video game. It's a masterclass in horror design that modern developers are still trying to replicate to this day. I really enjoyed and loved playing this game, and it was my first time playing it after seeing it discussed online for so many years. Hearing how everybody talked about it made me want to experience it for myself, and then also talked about it too, which inspired me to make this video and just talk about how this game, the atmosphere, how it captures everything for me personally. I loved every second of it. So if you haven't experienced Dead Space for yourself, please do. Whether it's the original one, if you have access to it, or if you want to just get the remake. It's not very inexpensive investment, and it's a masterclass in horror game design. And if you love this deep dive into what make games tick, please hit that like and subscribe, and join me in the bunker, away from the noise of the world and underground, where chaos makes sense.